Well, thank you all. It's so good to be here. I see a few familiar faces, so for those of you that I met last time, thanks for coming. And for those of you who are new, this is going to be a good morning. So get your seatbelts on, get ready. This is going to be challenging, this is going to be encouraging, but it's what we need to know, what we need to hear. So when I was here last time, I asked permission to be very honest, and sometimes that's hard. So what you're going to see today is not necessarily rainbows and sunshine. A lot of it is hard and it's difficult and it's deep, but this is what we need to know so that we can take care of our kids. And so this is something that I'm very, very passionate about. This is something that I've been pouring into for quite a few years now because of the significance of this for our children, my son, future generations. This is a big deal. So I'm very grateful to be here. Before I dive in, let me share a couple of housekeeping things. If you notice, there's a little card at your place setting. If you would like to enter, I'm giving away 3 access passes to all of my online training products. So I have a suite of all kinds of workshops that I've done and trainings, and I actually have a Device Detox video training. So everything that I have, you'll have access to, and we'll pull 3 of those cards. So if you would like to do that, Maya has a basket. Maya's my office manager. She is everything me. She's like my right-hand lady. So there's books available. We have a limited number of those at a discount if you'd like to buy one today. But the book is really not as important as this stuff. So let's dive in. I'm really, really excited. One last thing. I was asked at the beginning to make time for questions and kind of break that in. But this is not really a topic that I can pause and kind of take a lot of questions. So please write down anything you want to hear from me, anything you want to ask. I will stay at the end, and I will stay until 3 p.m. if I need to. So please just save all your questions. I promise I'll make time for Q&A at the end. All right, so I have to make sure I have my little gizzy here. All right, so I'm going to give you some words and just take them all in. I'm just going to list them out for you. Obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, suicidality, emotional dysregulation, relationship struggles, academic struggles, tantrums, outbursts, lack of self-soothing, insomnia, job stability, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, frequent and intense meltdowns. Okay, so that's a lot of yuck, right? Every single one of those words, I have data to show that it's linked to excessive screen time in kids. So when we look at this generation and we look at future generations and we think about what we are creating for our kids, it's all of those diagnoses, all of those disorders, and there is one pinpointed root that we can funnel it all into, and it's the volume of screen time that they have access to. And in previous generations, this was unheard of. It didn't exist, the technology wasn't there. So this is a very present problem. And the struggle is when we're actively dealing with a current issue, we have no longitudinal research to show us what that does in the future. So science is trying to keep up with technology, and that's the problem. So we are going to dive in. Get ready. It's going to be good. All right. So maybe. Okay. Yesterday, I searched kids screen use danger. I'm actually giving you my search term criteria. I typed kids screen use danger. This is just a smattering. So let's look at what came up. New study highlights health dangers of excessive screen time. How do you fix cell phone addiction's lasting impact on children? And then the subtitle is, increase in screen time impacts children's learning and ability to deal with other life situations. Research finds more negative effects of screen time on kids, including higher risk of OCD. The dangers of screen time for children. And I don't know if you can see the dates, but every single one of these are within the last year, all 2022, 2023. Virtual autism. Can too much screen time make your child autistic? An expert take. Watching videos and playing video games can increase children's risk of OCD. Too much screen time. Study finds link between infant screen time and cognitive issues later in life. How many times do we see babies in strollers holding a device? All day, every day. Screen use during infancy may poorly impact executive function. Age 13 and younger is too early for kids to be on social media, the Surgeon General admits. Surgeon General doesn't come out and say anything unless it's really important. They keep closed-lipped about a lot of things that they should talk about. And here's the light at the end of the tunnel. Kids who stay active without screens are happier and healthier, study confirms. Okay, so only 57% of parents report setting any restrictions on their kids' use of screens. 57%. So that means a little more than 4 out of 10 parents, it's carte blanche. You have access to whatever you want, whenever you want. I don't monitor, I don't limit, I don't restrict at all. And this is really alarming to me because when parents self-report, I'm a data person, I love research, I love data, so you'll hear a lot of it today. And I think that that corroborates this information when you can see that scientists and researchers are saying, yes, this is true, here's the proof, right? So when I see 57% of parents report, that's a little concerning to me, and here's why. There is a phenomenon that happens where when you ask parents to report on things, they under-report. So when you have 57% of parents reporting, that's probably not accurate because we don't want to admit, or we're not aware, or we kind of casually dismiss some things that we would be asked. So 57% are setting limits. That means probably half of kids have access to anything they want at any given moment. And here's what's interesting. This came out of a very, very recent study. The odds, I'm going to quote this because it's better sometimes straight out of the researcher's mouth. The odds of developing a disorder increased during the study period. Let me clarify. So during the study, the odds of developing a disorder increased by 15% for every hour a kid played video games. Let me say that again. The odds of developing a disorder over the study period increased by 15% for every hour a kid played video games. And increased by 11% for every hour that they watched videos. Very recent study just releases that information. So when we hear things like this, we have to do something about it, right? So who am I? Why am I here? Why is this important to me? So in 2006, I started the Kid Counselor Center, and we specialize in play therapy. Our children that we see are 3 to 14. And play therapy is a niche within the child therapy world, and we have been helping kids for a very long time. In 2021, God gave me the opportunity to build a 5,000 square foot building, and I was able to expand to see adults as well. So the Family Counselor Center was born in 2021. We now see adults, families, couples, and we do marital counseling and things like that. But our niche is kids, it always has been. So the Kid Counselor Center has been around for a very long time. It's a prominent name in the Tampa area. So here's why this matters, because when I've been seeing kids for almost 2 decades, and kids are not the same that they were when I started in 2006. And this keeps eating at me over this time. I keep thinking to myself, why are 5-year-olds coming into me for anxiety? Why are 7-year-olds depressed? Why are all of these kids getting diagnosed with all of these things? Why are pediatricians medicating so many kids? Why are the academic community saying, oh my gosh, like schools are awful now? And I'm a why person. So I hear this and I see this and I see the kids coming into my center and I'm saying, something doesn't make sense. What is going on? So then I'm on a mission to figure it out, right? And the front lines of this every day, with 5 play therapists, we can see 125 kids a week. We still have a 50-person wait list. So in my small town of Odessa, which it's not very big, it's an old logging and citrus grove town, we have 175 families that are saying, my kid is struggling, we need help. And that's just in my center. There's other children's therapists, so you know that that's more. And we see extreme behavior issues. We see extreme emotions. We see massive surges of anxiety, massive surges of depression, of suicidality. We have kids younger and younger and younger talking about killing themselves. And I'm watching this going, what is going on, right? And all of a sudden, I started seeing the signs, and I started connecting the dots, and I started saying, okay, this makes sense. So I want to read this to you. This is kind of an encapsulation of the whole thing. All forms of recreational digital consumption, whether on smartphones, tablets, game consoles, or TVs, have skyrocketed in the younger generations. From the age of 2, children in the West clock up more than 2.5 hours of screen time a day. By the time they reach 13, it's more than 7 hours a day. Okay, hold on. Added up over the first 18 years of life, this is the equivalent of 30 school years or 15 years of full-time employment. Just in hours, just amassing hours on screens, 30 school years, which is 180 days, right? An academic year is 180 days. Or you can say 15 years of full-time employment. So they have worked, by the time they're 18, 15 years on screens. It's horrifying. So this is what I think we need to see.
You're watching America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Parents considering giving their toddlers too much too soon in the way of gadgets might want to rethink that strategy.
This is what happens when mom and dad take away an iPad from 2-year-old Ashlyn Brooks. Poor baby, like it's the end of the world. Now, Ashlyn's parents insist that they let her use the iPad for educational purposes, but I don't know, maybe created a bit of a monster there.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let me unpack that for you. So the full video, I've actually seen the full video clip of that. They pulled that from a YouTube video and it became kind of like a viral, everyone in the news got into a firestorm over it. But she had the iPad, they took it away. That was the clip where she was upset about it. And I don't know if you could see it because they were talking, but they gave her the iPad back and she immediately stopped crying. And what you might not have heard the news people say, anchors I suppose, is that they say they only give her the app for educational purposes, or the iPad for educational purposes. Y'all, we cannot justify giving our kids screens for educational purposes. It's just as bad no matter what. It's screen time. It's not what they're doing on screens, it's screens. So that was her fix. And we're going to get into this in just a minute because this is a digital drug. I'm going to be very blunt and honest with you. This is giving drugs to our children. So let's unpack this together because this is a big deal and we can't say, oh, but if we're doing it in, an educational thing. And I'm going to get to this later. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but we need to stand up to the schools. And we need to take a stand and say, do not make my kid use an iPad for homework. Do not make my kid have an iPad for school. Do not make my kid sit on a computer in the classroom. We have to know what this is doing to our kids, and we have to take a stand and say no more. So we'll get there. But how it all began is important, right? So I would like to share a little bit of my journey in this because I've been there. So in 2016, we were building a home. It was almost done, and we were packing up to move. And in 2016, our son was 7. And because I'm a children's therapist, and because I know child development, and because I try to be a pretty proactive, engaged parent, I knew that screens were bad for my child even before I knew all of this. So he never had screens until he was 3. When he got screens, it was watching cartoons. We loved Paw Patrol, and we loved the Backyardigans and all of those fun cartoons. But he really had never had access to a tablet, an iPad, a phone, nothing, because I knew that they weren't really good for him. I wanted him to be a kid and play. I'm a play therapist, like go outside, dig in the dirt, right? So he had never really been exposed, but it was that season of life, right? So all of a sudden now we're packing and we're moving and we're busy and we're crazy, and it was like, okay, buddy, you can just sit and watch some TV. Well, we move into the new house, and we know none of the neighbors. We have no friends for him to play with. We're busy, and I can't just send him outside without me being there. So then it became, okay, here's a Montessori. He was in a Montessori school at the time. So we were like, here's a Montessori app. So do your counting sticks and your whatever. And so he was doing educational apps. And I noticed this really huge change all of a sudden in him where it's all he cared about. Can I have the iPad? Can I play my game? Can I do? And we were like, whoa, this is so strange. And I was like, well, he's lost his friends. He's lost his whole world. Like, so I explained it away, right? It's really easy to go, I'm sure it's not weird. I'm sure it's just normal. And then I would say, all right, bud, time to turn it off. And he would get angry and he would fight. And I would see emotions that I'd never seen. Our son is really low key. He's laid back. He's happy, always has been. And he's slamming his fist on the couch. And I'm like, whoa, what is happening right now? And so one night, you know, God gives us little moments of clarity, right? One night I'm sitting there and I'm like, is this because of screens? So 11:30 at night, I don't know what time it was, I sit down and I typed something along the lines of kids, screens, emotions or something. Oh my, were my eyes open. Like God took the blinders off, right? And I'm like, huh, how does no one know about this? Why is no one talking about this? It's right here in front of me. But here's the thing. It's stuck in the research community, it's stuck in the scientific community, and it's not making its way to moms and dads. And this was back in 16. So I've been evolving with this for a long time now. And when I saw these huge changes, I said, okay, I have to do something about it. I can't sit back. For my own son, for my friends and my family, and at my center, all these kids, parents need to know this. So I said, what's the best way to communicate to the masses? A book. So that's how we ended up with summer 2020 in the middle of COVID, of all things. Device Detox is released. And so this was 4 years of my research and my trial and error with our own son and figuring out things that work and how we manage it and how we balance it and all of those things. And this is interesting because it was released summer of 2020 when everyone was home and everyone was on devices all day, every day. And I thought, well, God's timing is perfect, isn't it? So we end up thinking, oh my gosh, now everyone is making this worse because kids are schooling from home and everyone's working from home and we're on our devices all day, every day. So here's what I think is very interesting. So we talked about self-report before, right? So self-report 8 to 18-year-olds. So the Pew Research Center interviewed a whole bunch of minors, 8 to 18, and asked them, how much time do you spend on a device a day? Throw out a guess.
15 minutes.
7 to 8 hours. 15, wow, they don't do anything except sleep. 7 to 8 hours a day was self-report. Now, here's the interesting thing. Kids are a little more likely to tell the truth because they're not trying to preserve their own dignity and their own parenting shame. So I think 7 to 8 hours is actually pretty accurate. But 8 to 18-year-olds, 7 hours a day, you factor in their school, their eating, and their sleeping, they're doing nothing else. It's nothing but screen time. And this is something that we have to get ahead of if we're not already behind, right? So this is something now, there's a sense of urgency for this. And this is us saying, okay, what do we do? How do we fix this? But I don't think we can get there until we dive into what we know and what we need to be aware of. So I have no connection with these people. I actually have talked to a few of them via email and things, but I'm not promoting these books. I'm not selling you on these books. I'm just letting you know I really value what these authors have put out there. And so I'm going to dive in a little bit about what they share. I've chosen these specific 3 because they each approach this from a very unique and different perspective. So they all have their own place in their community, in their field, their study. It's a little bit different, and so you'll see how you get the same conclusion from 3 very different perspectives with these 3 books. So the first is Glow Kids. Dr. Nicholas Kardaras. He's been interviewed on Fox and Friends and some other things. So he's kind of the face of this generation of books. So he is an addiction expert. So this is very interesting because we think about kids and screens as a problem, but do we realize that there's an addictive piece of this as well? And he is an addiction expert and pivoted to say, as an addiction expert, let's look at what this is doing to our kids. Is there a correlation here? And it's very, very highly correlated. So he talks about, and are y'all okay with some like deep scientific stuff here? Okay, so dopamine is it's a neurotransmitter that is your happy hormone, right? So when dopamine is released, it comes straight from your pleasure center and it says, this is good, right? Okay, so dopamine and adrenaline, which is another hormone, which is the excitement, your heart races, you feel ready to go. Dopamine and adrenaline are at the heart of addiction. So every time you have a dopamine and adrenaline combination, it becomes very addictive because it's in your pleasure center and it's saying, I want this again. This is good. Let's keep this going, right? This is how gambling addicts take place. This is how drug, alcohol, smoking, all of these things. It essentially becomes the fix, okay? So dopamine gets released, adrenaline gets released, you get a fix. Here's what no one is talking about that I think will, and we'll get into this a little bit more. I actually have some video clips to illustrate this, but no one is aware that video gaming companies, all of the tech world, they are hiring neuropsychiatrists, neuropsychologists, physiologists, biologists, chemists, engineers, you name it. They're finding the best of the best in the world and they're bringing them in and they're saying, how do we make this the most addictive? Because they want you to keep coming back. Because if you keep buying and you keep playing and you keep doing all these things, they become richer. So they are specifically gearing things to be addictive. And the dichotomy is we'll talk about this as well, we as adults, our brain is wired differently because it's fully developed. So we can recognize something and choose to come back or not come back. We don't always choose to not come back, but we have at least the cognitive ability to. Kids don't. So they're preying on the development of our kids and they don't have the capacity to do anything about it. There's the difference. We can say, I should stop playing Candy Crush. This is not good for me. I'm spending hours playing this dumb game, right? But kids can't. They're like, I need the fix, the adrenaline, the dopamine. I have to come back. I have to get the reward. And they have no control over it. So this is where he comes in and says, the addictive nature is really something we need to be aware of. And here's another under the radar thing that's happening. Addiction treatment facilities for screens are popping up all over the world. Quietly, secretly, no one knows what they are, no one knows why they're there. We have all of these addiction treatment facilities specifically for devices. We're not talking about alcohol recovery, drug recovery. This is internet addiction, cell phone addiction, social media addiction. There was a 2020 special on it. They had to send a 17-year-old boy out into the wilderness for 3 months on a digital detox. They had to send a teenage girl 2 months committed into a residential facility, and she cried and cried and cried and cried because she couldn't be on social media because they took her phone away. And we're not talking about this. And here's the thing. Do you remember, you remember hearing of it, many of you were not alive then, but in the 40s, 50s, all of a sudden they started really, really pushing hard smoking. So John Wayne is smoking, it's cool, actors are smoking, athletes are smoking, this is the cool thing to do. So they really had this push that everyone should smoke, and everyone started smoking because the commercials showed it and the movies showed it, and it became this big thing. Interestingly, we look back and we say, wow, that was really, we just didn't know the ramifications of that. We didn't know the health implications of that. We didn't know how bad it was going to be for us. We all, in this generation, we've been raised, cigarettes they cause cancer, they're dangerous, they cause COPD, whatever. Here's the thing, same exact thing that's happening with that is happening now. 50 years from now, people are going to look back and say, why did they let their kids sit all day, every day on screens? It's so bad for them. Why? And here's another piece of the puzzle. The Surgeon General with cigarettes knew how dangerous they were, but they masked it for the public. The Surgeon General's finally, decades after this epidemic has started, coming out saying, yeah, under 13 really shouldn't be on social media. But it's taken us this long. And it's been hidden, and it's been masked, and it's been covered up. Because it benefits tech, not because it benefits our kids. So we have to be willing to say, okay, here's the line, and we're not willing to go further. Irresistible by Adam Alter. He is a psychology and marketing guy. So keep in mind, we had addiction, right? So came at it from the addictive perspective. Adam Alter is psychology and marketing. So his take is he has been tracking the rise of behavioral addiction and talks about why so many products are irresistible to us, including video games and screens and all of those things, social media. So here's what he's saying. Companies are designing products and tweaking them until they become irresistible. That is the day and age in which we live. You combine psychology and marketing and you can make anything, you must have it, right? So their damaging magnetism is not accidental. What's going on is not accidental. It's actually very planned and very purposeful. And so you have the addiction side. You have the psychology and the marketing side. Then you have this book. This is actually very new, Screen Damage. It's translated. It was originally written in a different language, and so they've now come out with the English version. He is a neuroscientist. And he's looking at the detrimental consequences for, quote, health, behavior, and intellect of children and adolescents and the impact digital activity has on those three facets, health, behavior, and their intellectual ability. So this is really important because the academic implications are huge. And we're going to look at how all of these different things affect our kids. So we have the behavioral, we have the emotional, we have the academic, we have the relational, we have all of these things. But he's looking at it saying, this is going to affect our academics as well. It already is. You know how many teachers are leaving teaching in droves, like, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore? Kids are throwing chairs, kids are flipping desks, kids are getting Baker acted, kids are, I mean, why? Why? Is this a parenting problem? 100%. Is this a cultural problem? 100%. But the degree to which we're seeing these things, if you funnel, it's screens. So, as I said before, why is always my question. So if we know the why, we know the what, right? So that's the goal today, is to kind of help you see the why behind all of these things. So science. And before, I'm going to show you scans, I'm going to show you videos, I'm going to show you lots of things today. But before we get there, I would kind of like to give you a visual flow chart, if you will, so that you can kind of see how this funnels, because I think it's helpful if you have a tangible example. So let's use the example of getting a like on a social media post. So you post something, and what do you do after you post something? You keep checking back to see who liked it, who shared it, who did whatever, right? Because, okay, here's my disclaimer. I do not have any social media. I never have. So I'm going to say things and you're going to be like, you have no idea what you're talking about, and that's totally true. So just go with it, okay? So if I use the wrong words, it's because I truly have no idea. I've never been on social media. But you like, you share, you forward, you do whatever you do with social media stuff, right? But the goal is you want feedback. You want a reaction. You want to see what people think. You want to see what people's responses are, right? So same thing happens, a reward in a game. You get a level up, you get another life, you get a spin, you get a gem, you get whatever, I don't know, I don't play video games either. So you get this reaction, right? What do you think's happening there? your neurotransmitters are releasing dopamine. That's your pleasure center hormone, feel-good hormone, right? And you have your adrenaline surge because it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Okay, so you have dopamine. Let me clarify the center in which dopamine lives. It controls your emotional processing. It helps you with your attention span. How many kids have like a 4.2 second attention span right now? That might be generous. 2.1 second attention span right now. Why? Because their brain has been conditioned boom, 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 boom all the time. So we have emotional processing in that center, we have attention span, and we have decision making. All right, let me say those three things again. Emotional processing control, your attention span, and your decision making. That's all housed in the same area as the dopamine release. These regions are also affected when you drink, you smoke, you do drugs, you put some chemical in your body that alters your state. So, you get a like, you get a reward, you get that surge of adrenaline and dopamine. Very little effort is required for you to have those rewards. You wait for the like, you wait for the share, you wait for the reward. You do very little to get that, right? So over time, your brain starts to rewire itself. Over time, with this reinforced again and again and again, your brain starts to affect your body, and it will actually cause you to crave the same type of excitement that you've had before. I want that again. I'll repeat. I'll do that again because I want that again. I want this to continue. It's a self-fulfilling cycle, right? So after each interaction that you have, your brain says, let's do what we need to do to have this happen again. This is why we see texting and driving. This is why we play online games for hours at a time. Because we can't wait for the next thing, so we make sure that we continue the cycle. And we lose control when those are taken away from us. Dr. Peter Wybrow is the director of neuroscience at UCLA. Researchers in China and Dr. Andrew Doan, who is the head of addiction research for the Navy and the Pentagon. So that's a lot. Let me say that again. Peter Wybrow is the director of neuroscience at UCLA. Researchers in China and Andrew Doan, the head of addiction research for the Navy and the Pentagon, all collectively and jointly refer to screen technologies as a, quote, digital drug. Our Pentagon, our Navy, our universities, our greatest enemy in the world right now, they're all coming out and saying this is a digital drug. And this is why we should do everything we can to prevent our kids from getting hooked on screens. And this is at home and at school. Because now we have to fight the battle in academic settings too. This isn't just about we have to keep our kids off screens at home. Now it's we have to stop them from being on screens at school all day. So this is diving into science. I know you cannot see that. It's actually very hard to see in its original format, and I made it even bigger. You don't need to read any of the words. It's actually sharing parts of the brain. So that says corpus callosum, and so it's brain anatomy, okay? You don't need to know any of those words. But what I want you to see is we have an opioid crisis in our country right now, right? So this is someone who is addicted to opiates. And what I'd like you to see is everywhere these red arrows are pointing to spots in the brain, that is abnormal brain scan. So they can identify this as an addicted brain because of these areas where the arrows are pointing and talking about where there's a difference. Look at how it's almost a mirror image in an internet addicted brain. So we are literally seeing proof that addiction is addiction, and screens should be lumped in with all the other things that people get addicted to in this country. And this is for adults, this is for kids, this is universal, but our kids' brains aren't even fully developed. So it's a whole other layer when we have actively growing and developing brains, and this is what we're seeing. Ready for a neurobiology lesson? Okay. I promise that this is going to be simpler than it looks. I just want you to see, because I'm going to get into parts of the brain and how screens affect different parts of the brain. But I need you to have kind of a visual of how the brain works and what it looks like so that you understand what's going on. So for this one, all I want you to know is that the cerebrum and the cerebellum coexist in the brain, right? So you have a brainstem here, you have the cerebrum here, and you have the cerebellum here, and the cerebrum is here. That's all I need you to know, with the exception of the cerebrum is broken into 4 lobes. All right, so are we good on that?
Yes.
Okay, so keep that in mind as we're going through these things, because you need to know that the lobes are affected and what's inside the cerebrum is affected. So that's just so that we're all on the same page. Okay, the frontal lobe is a piece of this in a big way, because the brain's cortex manages critical thinking and reasoning. So, as we're talking about developing, as we're talking about growth and setting children up for success, we need them to be able to think critically. We need them to be able to reason well. We need them to be able to process something and let their brain influence their decision making. So the brain's cortex is what manages that. The frontal lobe specifically is responsible for overall well-being. It's responsible for academic success, for career success, and for relational skills. So I'm going to give you some specific data to kind of help unpack those things. So the cerebrum has those 2 hemispheres, right? And within those hemispheres, there's gray matter and white matter. That doesn't really matter a whole lot. I didn't mean to do that. Don't worry about the gray matter and white matter a whole lot. We're going to dive into that in a moment. But when we're thinking about the brain, the fully developed brain, meaning as adults, our brains are fully developed. We differ from the underdeveloped children's brains. We lead with our prefrontal cortex, which means our frontal lobe is kind of at the front of what we're doing when we make decisions throughout the day, which allows us to act rationally rather than impulsively. We don't always act rationally, but we have the capacity to do so, right? Kids are driven by their emotions. Have you ever noticed that you ask a child, why did you throw that at your brother? Why did you run out into the road? I don't know. And we go, what do you mean you don't know, right? But that's an honest answer. They don't know. They didn't think at all. Their brain was not involved in the decision. Their emotions said, do this, this is fun. I'm scared, I should run. I'm mad, I should throw. Like, it is emotional 100% of the time. Here's an analogy. This is not part of this. This is a freebie. I'm a play therapist, so here it is. Okay, the analogy I give parents is you have a vat full of water and you have a float switch at some point in the vat. And for those of you that don't know what a float switch is, the water rises to a certain level and it trips the switch. Okay, so the emotions rise and rise and rise in the vat. The float switch gets tripped and the emotions say, brain, you're on siesta, see you in a little while. Brain literally disappears out of the equation. Emotions dictate every decision that it is involved in that moment. Emotions de-escalate, they come back down, float switch gets tripped again, brain is invited back into the fray, and brain goes, why did you do that? You shouldn't have yelled, you shouldn't have screamed, you shouldn't have hit, you shouldn't have done anything. You get remorse, you get apologies, you get, I'm such a bad kid. Why? Because they had no idea what happened. Their brain is not involved in the process. Their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. So we can't expect our kids to think. We can't expect them to reason. We can't expect them to be rational. They're not. Abstract reasoning develops at 13. How many of you have kids under 13? Mine just turned 13. Don't expect them to be rational and reasonable. They're not. So when you say, why did you do that? Tell me what you're thinking. How are you feeling? How was school? What are you going to get? I don't know. And it's not willful. They don't know. Okay, so the amygdala, I didn't have that on the slide, but the amygdala, this tiny little almond-shaped piece in the back of the brain, is where the emotional center is, and that is where kids live. So the frontal lobe helps them with this stuff, but it's not developed yet. So teenage brains, kids' brains, they are still forming connections between the rational and the emotional departments of their brain. Knowing that, can you imagine when screens overload them, they're already emotional, what is the result inevitably going to be? They have no control over anything. So when we're looking at the frontal lobe, we have to be aware that if it gets damaged, if it gets compromised, if it is undermined in any way, these are the outcomes that our kids have to look forward to. Impaired relationships, impaired career success, impaired academic success, impaired well-being. If we want to set them up to thrive and succeed, we have to let their frontal lobe do what it's supposed to do. Pop quiz. Throw out a number. When does the frontal lobe stop developing? 20. Oh my goodness, I'm proud of y'all. Yes, mid-20s. So just because your kids become 14, 16, 18, it's not, oh, they're good, they're almost an adult, they're a teenager now. No, mid-20s. Guard your kids as long as they live with you. Keep them away from screens until you can't anymore. Because 25 is when this stops. So we have to give them as much space and as much time to let this naturally happen and not compromise it. And screens get in the way. So, oh, hold on, before we get there, I think I actually somehow skipped a slide. No, I guess maybe not. Okay, so here's what you need to know also before we get into white matter. The frontal lobe governs executive functions. So, what is an executive function? Planning, prioritizing, organizing, controlling their impulses, basically getting things done, being productive, right? So when we have kids that sit and stare at a paper and they're like, I just can't do it. I don't know. Go clean your room. Like, they have been wired because they don't know how to get things done, because their frontal lobe is being compromised. The fancy words, the striatum and the insula, it doesn't really matter. All you need to know is that those are two parts of the brain that are involved with the frontal lobe. They are the reward pathways. Here's why that's important. Because it helps you suppress socially unacceptable impulses. Say that again? Yes, it's worth saying again. The reward pathways help to suppress socially unacceptable impulses. So let that sink in for a minute. Do we need our kids to be able to suppress socially unacceptable impulses? Does our world need to suppress socially unacceptable impulses? And we're bad at it. And we're adults, we don't really have an excuse. Our kids haven't even developed this capacity yet. The insula, it's our capacity to develop empathy and compassion for others. Do we need to be a more empathic and compassionate people? Do we need to teach our kids what that looks like? They have to be able to integrate physical with emotional, and that happens in the frontal lobe. So it will actually dictate the depth and quality of all relationships. With you, with their friends, with their siblings, with their future spouse, with their kids, with everything. So frontal lobe is big, and studies show again and again and again that the frontal lobe is compromised with too much screen use. So that's number one. Your frontal lobe is compromised when your kids are spending too much time on screens. But I wanted to help you understand what that means, because I can say, look, you don't want your kids' frontal lobes to be compromised. That doesn't mean anything until you know what the frontal lobe is responsible for, right? So now we understand it's getting stuff done, it's empathy, it's compassion, it's the emotion and the rational fusing together. Okay, we good on that? Okay, so white matter. White matter is within the cerebrum. White matter is essentially the connection between the brain and the body. So it's our nerve impulses, it's our brain interacting with our bodies, it's basically the bridge for all of our daily functions in life. So brain tells arm to move, arm says, I want to pick this up, and the brain and the body are constantly interacting, right? Okay, I'm going to show you a scan in just a moment. Actually, let me just get there because it'll help. Okay, so this is from 2015, so this isn't even super recent, and if you'll notice, this is a related aside, almost all of these studies are coming out of China. So just file that away for when we talk about this in a little while. So almost all of these studies talking about how awful screens are coming out of China, who promote and produce the most screens of any country in the world. And they're very careful that they only send all of that technology to other countries, not their own. So anyway, okay, this is what you need to know about this. So you have the slice scan, and then you have top-down version. The only thing you need to know is CSF is cerebral spinal fluid, WM is white matter, GM is gray matter. We're going to talk about white matter and gray matter. This is showing you the different parts of the brain. The red is showing you where it has atrophied, shrunk, or been somehow affected. Look at here. That's top-down view. That's sliced through the center. And there's fancier words for that, but that's all you need to know. So the red is showing where all of that white matter has been compromised. Okay, so here's what you need to know about white matter. Spotty white matter, or atrophied white matter, or a reduction in white matter, which all have been proven in studies to be affected with screens, you actually lose communication within the brain. And here's what's most important. The paths between higher and lower brain centers are compromised. What does that mean? Your higher brain centers is your cognition, so your thinking. Your lower brain centers are emotions and survival. So the path that helps your children's brains think and feel simultaneously disappear. And you can see the red showing how it atrophies and shrinks. So when we are thinking in terms of white matter, when our kids don't know how to connect how they feel and what they think, when they don't know how to talk to you about how they're feeling, when they don't know how to resolve those two things, it's essentially, there's a short circuit that's taking place. The white matter is the circuitry, if you will. So you're actually getting like misfires and short circuits between your kids' lower and higher parts of their brain. We have to be able to let them develop in a way that they can function well as an adult. And the good news is white matter and gray matter, once they atrophy and shrink, they can come back. But they have to be removed from screens in order for that to happen. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. Okay, gray matter. I'm going to give you a break in just a minute. I know this is a lot. Okay, so your gray matter. This is also in the brain. Let me go back to that other slide because I think that'll be helpful. So you can see that the gray matter is actually gray and the white matter is actually white, right? So they serve different functions within the brain. Both have been shown to atrophy, shrink, and be damaged in these scenarios. So when you have shrunken gray matter is responsible for impulse inhibition and sensitivity to rewards, sensitivity to loss, poor task performance. So if you can notice, the white matter serves almost as the neural connections that help you think and feel. Gray matter is much more emotional. So you have your inhibitions, your impulses, your spontaneous decisions. That's all gray matter. So therefore, can you imagine poor task performance? Your brain's doesn't even have the capacity to help you handle your own impulses and control your own emotions now. So you're going to be all over the place. And it's really interesting because compassion is also tied to gray matter. So they've found links between the white and the gray. They both help with compassion. Have you noticed how kids are really, really selfish? Not developed, because, okay, look, kids are developmentally, appropriately self-centered. They're very I-centric beings. It's here and now, me in this moment, and I don't really see beyond that. That is developmentally appropriate. So I want to make that distinction. I don't want you to think, oh, my kid's selfish because whatever. No, they're normally supposed to be very I-centered. But selfish meaning you have no sense of compassion, you have no sense of empathy, you have no sense of care for anyone else, you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes. Gray matter and white matter are both involved with that. So this is a big deal just for relationships. There's some good news. So this is, look, more Chinese researchers. So this is brain scans, longitudinal study, kids with internet addiction. Okay, so here's what I want you to see. This is non-exposure to screens. As they spend more time on the internet, look at the red, increasing, changing, growing. That means white matter, that means gray matter, that means all the stuff we've talked about, frontal lobe, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, when they take kids back off of the internet, it repairs itself. Praise the Lord. Isn't it amazing that God has designed our bodies to be able to heal and restore and repair? Because we do dumb things and we put ourselves in bad positions, and God says, you know what? I'm going to help make this better, right? And so we have this huge change in brain scans over the course of their addiction, and then all of a sudden, it's mostly back to normal. There's this tiny little glimmer of change that's still there. But longitudinally, the brain heals. The brain repairs. Gray matter increases again. White matter increases again. The frontal lobe is repaired. So we can fix this. So I don't want you to go, oh my gosh, my kids are on screens all day, every day. They're ruined. They're done for the rest of their life. Like, there's never hope for any. No, that's not true. We have to give them a detox and get them to a manageable amount of screens so that their brains can heal and you start fresh again. So I promise you, there's hope, but we have to understand what we're dealing with neuroscientifically and neurobiologically so that that is our why, right? Because we can say all day, my kid won't get off a screen when I tell him to turn it off. Well, that's annoying and that's frustrating and that's a behavior thing, but it's beyond that. So we have to see this. So this is going to be the last part, and then we'll take a break because I think y'all need to give your brains a rest. Okay, so short-term effects of excessive screen time. I want to be really clear to give you very specific, detailed things because I want you to know what you're dealing with. And there's more. I just kind of summarized things I haven't already talked about. So excessive screen time suppresses secretion of melatonin, which means your kids are not going to get restorative sleep, they're not going to get deep sleep, they're not going to be able to fall asleep, they're not going to be able to stay asleep. And let me make it very clear, when kids or humans are sleep deprived, everything is harder to manage. So when kids are chronically fatigued and chronically exhausted and chronically tired because they're not sleeping well, it makes them have a harder time with their emotions, a harder time with their behavior, a harder time with their obedience. And they're already having a hard time because their brain's all whacked out. So this is just, it's like another layer of the puzzle here. Excessive screen time releases dopamine. We talked about that. But what does that do? It negatively impacts impulse control. You notice how impulsive kids are? Sometimes it's emotionally, developmentally appropriate, but this is on a whole other level that we've never seen before. There is an increased risk of anxiety and depression, especially with social media use. And we're going to dive into social media after the break, so hang on. But anxiety, depression, OCD, ADHD, suicidality, you name it, all of those things I said at the beginning, it's all associated with excessive screen time. All right, so that's the short term. Long term, the premature thinning of the brain cortex, we just talked about that, critical thinking and reasoning. Lower structural integrity of white matter, which is your language and literacy and all those other things. And then gray matter atrophy, the depth and the quality of personal relationships. So let's just pause on those right there. I think every parent would want their children to be able to think critically, to be able to reason, to be able to speak and write and read effectively, to thrive academically, right? And to have depth and quality of their personal relationships, both now and in the future. And excessive screen use is compromising all of it. So what does that mean? In contrast, we are raising a generation of kids that can't do any of that. Lord help us all. I mean, 30 years from now, when our kids are parents and they're running our country and they're running businesses and they're, I mean, where are we going? We have to say enough is enough. So thank you for being here, because this is the day, right? This is the day the world changed. All right, so y'all are free to go give your brains a break for 5 or so minutes, and then we'll come back. So thank you for those of you who came up and asked me questions and chatted with me. It's good to connect on a more personal level. So, and as I said, I'll stay after and I can talk to you about anything y'all want to talk about afterwards. So, all right, so some of the questions I received in the break is, how do we know what you mean when you say screens? So does that include TV? Does that include, how do we identify that? So there is 100% a hierarchy of devices. So let me explain what that means. So a television on the other side of the room with content really of any kind is going to be the least engaging for the brain and therefore the least harmful. So when you are looking at a screen, watching a show, watching a movie, I mean, obviously the content matters, that's not what I'm trying to say, but when you're just watching something on the other side of the room, the blue light isn't impacting you as much, the engagement is not as strong, your nervous system is not overstimulated, so TV is going to be the least harmful. But it is still screen time. So when we talk about, God bless you, when we talk about over screen use, we do include TV in that. And we'll look at what the recommendations for time constraints are. You're going to be very surprised. Your 30 seconds and that's it. Time now. Gosh, y'all are like taking this really seriously. Okay. So TV is the least harmful. Computer is going to be the next in the hierarchy. Now, that can be a laptop or a desktop, but the disclaimer is if you're just looking at it and not gaming on it, right? Because watching something is different than actively playing. So your laptop, your desktop computers are the next in the line. Anything that you hold in your hands is going to be the worst. So the tablet, the iPhone, the iPad, like whatever you are actively holding, that is the worst. Watching something, holding it, is less harmful than playing something on it. So a video game, anything you are actively manipulating with your hands is the most taxing, most stimulating, most harmful. Make sense? So think about it in terms of how many layers of the brain are going to engage. Watching something, you're just passively observing. The closer it is, the more engaging it is, the more you are actively involved in what you're doing on the screen at the worst, right? And so let's talk briefly about games, because that's important too. So solitaire, sliding a card from one stack to the other, not nearly as overwhelming, stimulating, harmful, damaging as Call of Duty, right? Okay, so when we think about games, there's a hierarchy of games too, right? Because we can't say that all games are created equal. They're not. All right, now here's another bonus freebie for you. Oh, I just got my shoe stuck. Hold on. Okay, so you have to look at how the game is going to make money. So let me explain what I mean. If you buy an Xbox game, you shell out your $50 and they never make, I know that's horrific in and of itself, but you shell out your $50 and you never pay them another cent. They've made their money up front. There is no other way they can incentivize you to spend more money. The game is the game is the game, right? Free games, freemium games, how do they monetize? You have to watch videos, you have to level up, you have to spend money to get your extra gems, you have to spend money to play again. That is the death of our generation. Okay? So here's what you need to do. If your kid is going to be on a game of any kind, you shell the money out up front and you be done. These freemium games, these free apps, these play and, you have to wait 24 hours before you can get another spin. They are designed intentionally, purposefully, and with forethought to make them as addictive as possible, because we are a instant gratification society. So therefore, I can't wait 24 hours. Mom, can I have $6 so that I can buy the blah, blah, blah? And the ding, and the spin, and the gem, and the reward, and the whatever. What is it doing? It is overloading our kids' systems. So here's the history, just because I like data. Mafia Wars was the first game to make you wait before you could continue. Okay, so I don't know if you all played Mafia Wars, I didn't, but you need to know Mafia Wars was kind of the pioneer of this premise of you can't just play. My generation, I didn't even get a Nintendo, I don't know, gosh, probably till 12, 13, I don't know. But the little move to the right all the time game, like Mario jumps over the pipes and into the pipes and gets the mushroom. Okay, that kind of game, you played and you played and you played until your 3 lives were over and the game started over. There's no incentive to come back. I mean, you may restart with your three game lives again, but you can't do anything about it. You die, right? Unless you get the turtle shell that gets in the loop and it gives you 9,000 lives. I loved that when that happened, but otherwise you have 3 lives and you're done, right? Okay, so we are not comparing apples to apples when we say, well, I played video games when I was a kid too. No, you didn't. You played Mario Brothers. This is not the same thing. Duck Hunt, Tetris, Sonic, we're not talking about what we're doing now, okay? So we have to get this out of our head that a video game is a video game. It's not. So Clash of Clans came after Mafia Wars. Clash of Clans was the next level. Okay, here's what's really important for you all to know. Angry Birds and Candy Crush came out within a year or so of each other. Okay, Angry Birds was an app in its original form, 99 cents. And gaming companies, big tech companies, they test everything. They do research all day, every day for all kinds of acquisition of data, and then they influence what they do moving forward. They realized that a 99-cent app charge was a hindrance to people paying for it. Even at 99 cents, they did not have the volume of sales that they thought they could achieve. So they switched to a freemium version. This is noteworthy. They made $1 billion after they switched it to a freemium game. $1 billion with a B. $1 billion in 1 year once it became a free. They were happy, yes. The birds were angry, they were very happy. So they made $1 billion in their first year. $1 million a day when they started this out. Okay, so here's why this matters. The games are intentionally addictive. And when we say, well, the content of that game is fine, I would hope we're not letting our kids play Call of Duty, but we may let them play Angry Birds, right? But it doesn't matter. The content is valuable, of course, because we don't want our kids to be exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to, but it is designed to keep them coming back and keep them addicted. And I was actually sharing with her during the break, here's why the schools are undermining what we need to do as parents. She mentioned that now her kindergartner has to read a book every night on this new educational app. And my son's charter school required IXL, which is essentially math and reading, and it was daily expectation, and it was gamified. I went into the app and I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is a glorified game. Like, if you don't do it, and he would go, Mom, can you log in and can you do the blah, 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 because I have to get the blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hard no, like, I'm done. And so IXL and all of these educational apps that are being required now, they're gamified. So it's essentially video games for educational purposes, and it's nonsense. So I want to quote something. This is really important because you need to hear what a former Google manager said. He has since become a whistleblower, and the whole industry hates his guts now. But Tristan Harris is his name. He was a former Google manager. He said, some parents are under the false impression that digital use is the same as chatting on the phone in past decades or playing video games in the past. And here's his quote. There's a narrative that, I guess they're just doing this like we used to do. But what this misses is that your phone in the 1970s and your video games in the 1990s didn't have 1,000 engineers on the other side of it who were redesigning it to work with everything else and updating the way that everything works to be more and more persuasive and addictive. End quote. So this is bigger than what we know, and this means that we have to be more diligent in our response. So, Jordan Foster, a psychologist who specializes in kids and screens and all of those things, says, consider it similar to sending a young child out into a vast, unfamiliar environment in the real world without providing them with any tips, tools, or supervision to ensure their safety and increase their resourcefulness. So every time our kid is on a screen in this digital world, that's essentially what's happening. They're going to a vast, unfamiliar environment with no tips, tools, or supervision to make sure that they're safe and help them be resourceful. So we can't let that happen, right? Okay, so here to answer your question, what does this mean? What do we do? How do we get into a balanced state of screen use? The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends under 2 years old, nothing. And I personally wish that these other 3 bullet points went away and we just said nothing, period. But the recommendations for 2 to 5 is less than an hour a day. Now, there's the APA and the AAP. So the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Pediatric Association have both weighed in, and so that's why there's an or here. So the 5 to 17, less than 2 hours per day, is the AAP recommendation. The APA recommendation is under 10, is less than an hour a day. So they actually say 2 to 10 and then 11 to 17. But the moral of the story is, your little ones, nothing. Your under kindergartners, less than an hour, and then everyone else, 1 to 2 hours. But remember, self-report is 7 to 8 hours a day. And we're looking at, by the time they're 18, 30 school years, 15 years of full-time work. We're not even close. We're not even in the same ballpark. So when we talk about what is included, that means everything. That means the time that they're on screens for school, the time that they're watching TV, the time that they are on social media, the time that they're playing a video game, the time that they're watching YouTube, the time that they're chatting with their friend on text. It all counts. This isn't exclusive to video games. This isn't exclusive to one particular piece of devices. It's all devices. So when I was here last time, I had someone that said, but my kid is in online school and he spends all day, every day in front of a computer. And I didn't realize that it was like audible, but I went, perish the thought. Like I was like, oh, sorry, you heard that. I think this is horrible because our kids spend all day in front of a screen, and these are the recommendations. And look, if the American Pediatric Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics are saying this, I think it actually should be less because they're pretty generous with their recommendations sometimes. Because it's like, oh, every parent should decide, and you know, these are just the guidelines, they're not hard and fast rules. And they're saying up to 18 years old, less than 2 hours a day. So it's a big deal. I think that means a video's coming up. Hold on. Oh, okay. So here's what you need to see. I mentioned it before, but I want you to see the evidence because I think that matters. So look at what's coming up in searches. Treatment for technology addiction, internet and computer addiction treatment program options. Digital detox, it's not just for tech addicts. The 19 best Florida internet addiction rehabs of 2023, complete with pricing. Oh, by the way, the top one's in Boca. That one is luxury rehabs. Those are all in Florida. A Place of Hope's in Florida. Internet digital addiction. Relatively new phenomenon, but it's one of the fastest growing addictions that we have in our country. But we don't know that this is happening right in front of our faces, under our noses. But here they all are. So there's your best addiction rehabs in Florida, right there. We should all go. Get us on a bus. Okay. Just load up. Let's go. So I want you to see that this is a pervasive, widespread, creeping across every part of our landscape as a country, and no one's talking about it. So I'm blown away. Every time I do another search, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's more. All right, I want to show you this.
This morning, we have a follow-up on a story from yesterday, how China is cracking down on children playing online video games. Anyone under the age of 18 is only allowed to play 3 hours a week, except during holidays. Geez, thanks. It's part of a larger concern in China about the impact of too much game playing. Some kids are even going to rehab to deal with it. Remy Inocencio reports.
In China, video games aren't just a pastime. They're a way of life for many youth. But at packed cafes like this one in Beijing, it's game over after Beijing announced a draconian crackdown on this kind of youth gaming culture. Among the rules, no playing video games at all from Monday to Thursday. And on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, play is limited to 1 hour a day between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. State media pushing the government line, no industry can be allowed to destroy a generation. Some of that generation find themselves here at a digital detox facility to fight addictions to video games, cell phones, even the internet. Here, young men and women live structured boot camp-style days with counseling and group therapy. Accommodations are basic, with a communal eating area. But they're not alone. Their parents live here too. It's all part of the program. This man told CBS News his son spent 8 to 9 hours online each day and would steal his money, then disappear for months. This boy, unrelated, told us he fell in with bad people before being sent here. Taoran is the man behind this rehab. The director was a People's Liberation Army colonel with a specialty in psychology. He says 85% of minors have some kind of internet addiction. We asked Paul Haswell, a tech and online media expert in Hong Kong, about the gaming crackdown.
What does that mean for the tech industry, for the gaming industry then?
I think it's quite bad news for some of the homegrown ones. I think Tencent are going to struggle the most because of this.
Tencent is the creator of Honor of Kings, one of the most profitable video games on the planet right now. Its stock plunged 10% on August 3rd, losing $60 billion in market cap when state media described China's gaming culture as electronic drugs and spiritual opium. Tencent stock has since rebounded. But Beijing has now made it clear protecting, many would say policing, the country's future generation is more important than any company or any family. For CBS This Morning, Remy Inocencio, Hong Kong.
I can, sure. So why does this matter? Because other countries in the world are wising up way faster than we are. And they're putting policies in place that make it very clear how they value protecting their kids. So I found that and I was just like, oh my gosh, and we're gonna get to China and that in just a moment. So, all right, so let's dive into other dangers, because we can talk about devices as a whole, but I think these two are kind of a subset, and I think this is equally as important. So let's talk about social media, because we are really not aware of the dangers of social media. So please don't let your kids on social media. Just don't. Make it impossible for them to have access on a regular basis to social media. I want to quote something. This is actually from one of the books. You could actually watch as the social media conversation moved from, quote, iPads are just like comic books were to us 50 years ago, to, quote, wait, why are those suicide numbers so high, end quote. So we're wising up, but it's taking a long time. And here's some data for you. Girls are more likely to become addicted to social media than boys. However, 68% of girls and 57% of boys. So it's really not that much of a difference. They're both highly addictive to boys and girls. But girls slightly more likely to become addicted specifically to Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. Here's what you need to know. TikTok is our greatest enemy right now. Okay, I promise you this will not be a political spiel, but I need you to understand what's going on. The CCP owns, manages, and runs TikTok. Their algorithms change to American audiences versus Chinese audiences. So, the Communist Chinese Party. China, okay, so we have the same thing going on as Russia during the Cold War. Would we have ever allowed Russia to have a media channel? Would we have ever allowed Russia to have a newspaper? Would we have ever allowed Russia to have any influence on our country during the Cold War? Not a chance. And the greatest social media platform is run, owned, and managed by our greatest political enemy. And here's what's happening. They have algorithms. So a girl, teenage girl, which they know she's a teenage girl, by the way, because they profile everything and everyone, including your voice, including your face, including your videos. Who knows what data is stored on our kids from TikTok right now? Okay, so let me throw that out there too. But they know it's a teenage girl, and a girl types in healthy recipes. Within several days, the algorithm funnels them to eating disordered content. So we're driving a girl who wants to eat healthy to bulimia and anorexia and eating disorders within a few days because the content aggregates according to the algorithm. They are purposefully sending our kids transgender and identity confusion and LGBT and homosexuality and all of this bilge. And guess what the Chinese youth, what the algorithms are putting forward for them? Pride, masculinity, love of country, strength, accomplishment. They are literally undermining us with the platform they created that is taking over our entire country at every turn. And don't take my word for it, look it up. I promise you can find all kinds of information about what's going on. So here's what is too scary to not be aware of. They store data, they know everything about everything on TikTok. And there are study after study after study showing kids are developing anxiety from TikTok, depression from TikTok. They're committing suicide from TikTok. There was a video of a girl who developed a tic because she watched a TikToker with a tic. And so it like manifested in her own body because she watched this. I mean, it's everywhere. And we need to protect our kids. So know how bad TikTok is. Please get your kids off of it if they're on it. Don't give them access to it. As a related aside, Roblox, also just as bad. Please don't let your kids on Roblox. It's like a gaming conglomerate where there's just like thousands and thousands and thousands of games. And so as long as you have it, you can find a game. Here's why. Not only is it addictive, not only is it all of the other bad things we've talked about, It allows user-generated games and user-generated content. So what that means is I could create a game with whatever I wanted in it, and your kid can click on it and play it, and Lord only knows what there's going to be. Predators are known for lurking in Roblox. They are targeting Roblox users because young kids are on Roblox. And there's sexual content, there's graphic content, there's homosexual content, there's cussing, there's violence, you name it, it's there. So we have to be aware of what's going on, and we have to get our kids out of these places. And I want to share why, before we move into the cell phone side of this, I want to share why social media and games are so devastating on another level that we haven't discussed yet. So everyone knows maybe not everyone knows, I make assumptions. There are two sides of the nervous system. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. You don't need to know what that means other than one is responsible for fight or flight. We all probably have heard that, right? So instinctively, self-preservation, fight or flight says there's this moment, you have to have energy, you have to have adrenaline, here's your heart racing, here's your energy, go, right? So it's, I'm gonna go run and, save someone, I'm gonna get myself away from a tiger, whatever. So you have this fight or flight instinct, right? That is one side of the nervous system. The other side is rest and digest. So here's what happens. Our body is wired, designed by God, to only be in fight or flight temporarily for short bursts, and then we live in rest and digest. That is the way our brains are meant to function. So burst of fight or flight, we move back to rest and digest. And our body can sustain the fight or flight because we recuperate in rest and digest. Everything that screens encompass keep us in fight or flight. So what does that mean? Our cortisol levels are through the roof. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Our nervous systems are so stimulated, so taxed, so overworked, so overwhelmed. We don't eat well, we don't sleep well, we don't exercise. Our brain is constantly firing. Go back to gray matter, white matter, frontal lobe, all of this damage that's taking place. It compounds, it builds, it escalates. And when we keep ourselves in fight or flight, we compromise our ability to handle life as a whole. And until we give our bodies a chance to rest and digest, nothing gets better, it gets worse. Because the longer we stay in fight or flight, the worse it compounds. Which is why damage takes place, which is why this is addictive, which is why all of these things. So when we think about the way God designed our brains, especially our kids' brains that aren't even developed yet, they are not made to handle this. The stimulation, the constant dings, bells, spins, colors, lights. It's no wonder they act like ping pong balls all the time, like bouncing off the walls, because their brain is constantly firing at all cylinders. So social media does the same thing. It's this constant fight or flight, waiting for everything to unfold. And what we need is to stare at the beach and watch the waves come in and listen to the birds and the wind and throw a ball and run in the grass, and that is rest and digest. Get outside, get your kids to go play. I mean, as a play therapist, related aside, as a play therapist, I could give you 3 hours worth of quotes about the benefit of a child playing. But playing video games is not playing. Sitting staring at a screen is not playing. I don't care if they're playing with their friends. I've got my headset on, I'm talking to my buddies from school, I'm playing whatever game, Brawlhalla with my friend. Like, no, you are on a screen and you're overtaxing your brain and you're creating damage. So get outside and get them away from all of this junk. Okay, now, cell phones. Here's what you need to know about that. Unless a cell phone is internet free and social media free, your kid will figure out a way to get access to everything they want access to, no matter what parental blocks you have, no matter what parental controls you have. There are videos up the wazoo of how to crack every single parental everything that has ever been invented in the world. And all they do is take their phone that you have locked down and figure out how to unlock it from the social media, and then they unlock their phone and then they do whatever they want. I'm a children's therapist. You would not believe the stories I hear of all of the creative ways the kids have figured out how to get around everything related to their screens. My teenagers are like, oh, well, his mom tracks him, so he just leaves his phone with his friend, and then he just goes wherever he wants, and like she sees that he's in Orlando, but he's actually over it. My gosh. So, and that's just the GPS tracking. I mean, it doesn't matter what you have, they can access it. So, here's my recommendation. Oh, also, there is a new movement. It's called Wait Till 8th, I think. I'm pretty sure it's called Wait Till 8th. And they're saying no child under high school should ever have a smartphone. Okay, so here, but then people go, well, what am I supposed to do? My kid walks home from the bus stop. I need him to be able to call me if something happens. What do I do? They have to be able to text their friends. What do I do? They have to have communication. This is what you do. Oh, wrong way, sorry. Get him a brick. I did tell my son I was going to get him a flip phone, and he burst into tears and literally and said, I already get made fun of that I don't have a phone. You can't buy me a flip phone. And I was like, okay. So this was my solution because I research and I try to find out what to do. So Gab Wireless with 2 B's. This is a company out of Utah. It is an internet-free phone. It is a social media-free phone. It is safe. They text, they talk, and they take pictures. That is it. It is a flip phone, but it looks cool, okay? So we got our son this. All of his friends have it. My clients have gotten them. Oh my gosh, this was the most endearing celebrate moment. One of my kids, he's 8, he came and his mom's like, we just went to the zoo and he went to see Santa, and they had all the kids fill out a paper, like my name is, my age is, and this is what I want for Christmas. And he wrote a Gab phone on his wish list from Santa. And I was like, I've done one thing right today. Thank you, Lord. So, and he got one from Santa, so I was so excited. But here's why this matters, because when your kid has a Gab phone, it's peace of mind. You can get a hold of them, they can get a hold of you. It has tracking, but it can't do anything else. There's no controls to get around, there's no secret loopholes to find. It is just a phone. And I'm an affiliate because I really value them as a company. They're amazing. If you use promo code PLAY through the 15th, so you only have like 4 days, but their Valentine's Day special, you will get 30% off plus a free accessory. But you have to use promo code PLAY. So I'm just letting you know. They do run promos like periodically throughout the year, so if you don't get it now, there'll be another one. If you follow me, I'll always let you know when I have a promo running with them. But you have a watch, you have a phone, and it's safe. So I'm not saying that technology isn't helpful. I'm not saying that our kids don't need to be able to get a hold of us and we need to get a hold of them. But you have to find safe ways to do it. So there's your Gab Wireless. All right, here's the system to get to a manageable level of screens, because I can't tell you all this and then have you go home. Actually, last time I was here, I had a mom come to me and she goes, so I'm going home, I'm ruining all 3 of my kids' lives, and that's the plan for today. And I was like, well, hold on. So I really don't want you to ruin all of your children's lives. So here's my recommendation and my thought, because it's important to have a plan, and it's important to have a process, and it's important to prepare, because we will not succeed at this if we handle this poorly, if we handle this rashly, and if our kids feel completely out of the mix here. So this is what I recommend. I do not recommend going home and, as he mentioned, setting fire to all devices in the house. Okay, so here's why. Because your kids, if they have not already been exposed to screens, if they're really little and this is like a preventative thing, this will give you a system as they grow to manage screen use. If you're saying, okay, I really need to dial back, this has been too much, I need to reset, there has to be something that makes your children buy in and understand. Because you come here, they're sitting wherever they're sitting, and they think life will go on as normal as of 12 p.m. today. And here you walk in and go, oh boy, let me tell you, we're on a whole new thing. And they're like, sorry, what? Okay. Fight or flight, don't put them there. They need to rest and digest. So here's why this matters, because if you prepare and plan and discuss and have them involved and teach them and talk to them and bring them into the fray of this, they will not like it. So here's the disclaimer. It's going to be a fight no matter what. But they will at least understand the why. And when we understand the why, it makes all of the difference. When we started this plan with our son, let's backtrack to 2016. He's losing his mind. I'm going, what is happening? I realize it's screens. And I said, okay, no more. It was a fight. And he was mad, and he was angry, and he asked all the time, and he begged all the time. And when we got through that withdrawal period, because it is in fact a withdrawal period, I was able to say, buddy, what is my job? And I've had this conversation with him so many times, I don't even have to finish the questions anymore. He knows where I'm going, he knows what I'm going to say, and he responds on my behalf. So I say, buddy, what is my job? To keep me safe. Right. So am I doing my job if I let you have access to something that I know is not safe for you? No, but I know, but your brain can't handle it, and it's my job to keep you safe. But oh my God, I know, but I have to do my job, and my one and only job is to keep you safe. And when you are a broken record and you say that again and again and again, here's the really cool thing about kids. They're not rational, they're not logical, they're not cognitive, they're none of those things. They have no abstract reasoning even. But no one can argue with safety. No kid says, don't keep me safe, don't protect me, I want to get hurt, I want to be damaged. No kid ever feels that way. So when it's housed in, I have to keep you safe. They don't like it, but there's no argument to be had. So how do we keep our kids safe? We have to decide individually, collectively, as a family. Like, I'm not going to give you, it has to be this way, black and white. I've had a lot of parents read my book and go through this system, and a lot of parents have reached out and said, here's the system we came up with. I read your book, I looked at your suggestions, and we did this. This was better for our family. Some have cold turkey quit. 4 kids, 8 and under, 2, 4, 6, 8, and she said, we're done, and I would get picture after picture after picture of them playing with Legos and playing outside. And I couldn't believe that she did it that way. I thought, oh my gosh, you have 4 kids fighting you for screens. But that is what life is. That is what childhood is. That is what our kids are meant to do, is to have fun and play and not be damaged by screens. So you can cold turkey it, but I don't recommend it. I recommend going, what is manageable for my family? What is manageable for my kid? Some kids are not addictive personality kids. They can take it or leave it. They can watch a TV show, you can turn it off, they get up and they go do something else. Some kids, it does not affect the same way. Some kids are addictive personality kids, and they obsess, okay? So I don't really care about screens too much, can probably have a little more grace with time on screens. Your addictive kids cannot. It's going to be let's find a balance for my kid, my family, my life, right? But a system has to be in place. You have to go in and say, let's talk about this. Let's plan. Let's formulate. Let's figure this out. I want to make sure that during the week my kid has no screens. I'm not saying that because that's what they do in China. I'm just saying for a while our son did not have screens during the week at all. Now he typically can earn screens for a little bit in the afternoon. But he's 13, so we're a little bit further in the development process now. When he was little, no screens during the week, he knew it. He'd come to me and say, Mom, can I watch? There was a little while where he got really into Monster Jam, trucks, whatever, and then there was a little while where he got really into WWE. So he would know that that was gonna be on that night, like Monday Night Raw or whatever it is. So he'd be like, Mom, can I watch WWE? Buddy, what day is it? Monday. Do you get screens during the week? No. Okay. And that's it, because there was a system, right? Here's what you need to know. If you do not have a system, this will fall apart. Your kid needs to know the system. You need to know the system. It cannot be a fly by the seat of your pants, willy-nilly, like today, sure, screens are fine. Tomorrow, no, this is bad for you. Like, it has to be consistent. They have to know, you have to know. Here's what's beautiful about kids. They need, want, and thrive under expectations and boundaries. So when they know what the boundaries and expectations are, it's much easier for them to operate within the confines of those boundaries and expectations. When one day it's yes, when one day it's no, when at 3 p.m., it's sometimes at 3 a.m., get the phones and TVs and screens out of their rooms. That's a noteworthy related aside. Do not let them have screens in their rooms, ever, for any reason, at any time. But you know, at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, it's fine, but at 6 p.m. on a Friday, it's not. Like, it's too confusing. It's too hard to manage. You will fail. They will fail. Everyone will be frustrated. And then you're going to go, it was just easier when I let them have screens, and then back to the same scenario again, right? So I'm going to share 2 things that we've found. I actually have more in the book, but these are the 2 that I think are the most helpful. You can kind of tackle this from different perspectives. But incentives are a really helpful way to manage this. So first and foremost, you have to decide, what screen time do I feel comfortable with for my kids? Do I want screens during the week or do I not? Is it 30 minutes a day? Is it an hour a day? Is it just on the weekends? Is it just after they've completed homework? Whatever. Like, whatever you want to do, you have to have a number in your head. Your children have to know the number. Okay? Then you can set up an incentive type of program. So you can earn screen time, and we will bank your time, either for the day, for the week, for the weekend, whenever they're going to be allowed to have it. So in this scenario, you create a task. If you make your bed and empty the dishwasher, that is worth 15 minutes of screen time. You get to decide. This is totally customizable, right? So it can be they get up and out the door on time for school. It can be they complete their chores. It can be they do extra stuff that they normally wouldn't do. And it's age-appropriate tasks. That's very important. This cannot be universal for all of your children. It needs to be per child, because a 4-year-old task and a 10-year-old task are very different. So each child gets their own tasks and their own value. A 10-year-old might have more screen time than the 4-year-old, so the worth can change too. So per child, per scenario, what are the tasks that you would like them to do, and you keep track. So if they get daily screen time, if they do 3 things on Monday, that earns them 30 minutes of screen time, because they're all worth 10 minutes each. Make sense? So you're essentially setting up a system so that the child knows, I've earned screen time because I made my bed and I emptied the dishwasher and I did whatever. Likewise, and conversely, if they do not do those things, they have not earned any screen time. Work it to whatever system you think will work in your family, but your kids need to have buy-in, your kids need to understand, it needs to be very clear. I always advocate age-appropriate truth and honesty. Parents are known to keep information from their kids because they think they're protecting them from things. Your kids need to know how dangerous screens are. Your kids need to know what you learned today, age-appropriately. I tell my son all the time, and have since 2016 when this began, buddy, your brain isn't ready for this. God didn't wire your brain to be able to handle this. This is hurting your brain. It's making things harder for you in life. We can't have that. Tell your kids why. Help them understand. Tell them you're about to implement a new system. One of the phrases that I train in my parent coaching program is, we're about to institute a new and significant policy within the confines of this household. Why? Because it gets their attention. And they go, whoa, I better listen because this sounds important, right? So we're about to institute a new and significant policy within the confines of this household. And the policy is, we're only doing screens for an hour a day now. What? Okay, hold on, let's talk. You're gonna be involved. You get to tell me what you want to do. What do you want to do to earn screens? Well, I mean, it wouldn't be so bad if I finished my homework by 4 o'clock. Okay, finish homework by 4 o'clock, 10 minutes. Get them involved, get their opinion, get them buying in, because when a kid feels power and control over a powerless and controlless situation, you coming in and taking screens away, reducing screen time, limiting screen time, they're going to feel powerless and out of control. What do we naturally do as human beings when we feel out of control and powerless? We fight. We resist. We get defensive. We fight and we grab, and we're constantly in a power struggle. So what do? We say, hey, I want you involved. I want you to help me figure out what we're going to put on here. I wonder if you'd like to play 30 minutes a day, or if you'd like to save it for the weekend. Granted, if you have in your head, my kid doesn't get more than 3 hours a week, you can divvy that up however you want. 3 hours on the weekends, 30 minutes a day, whatever, however you want to do it. But have them involved, because it matters. They're more likely to comply, they're more likely to not resist, and they're more likely to follow through when they have ownership over the system. If you go in and say, here's the rules, here's how it's going to be, like it or lump it, off we go, it's not going to work. So get them involved, help them help you. And when incentive systems are self-fulfilling. So when oh my gosh, I was done in like 10 minutes with all 3 of my things, and I just earned 30 minutes. This is awesome, right? As they do it, and as it reinforces that they do in fact earn screen time when they do these incentives, it makes them want to do more. It got to a point where our son, like he's super clever, super, like he's going to be a negotiator of some sort in his life. We give him credit all the time, even when the answer is still no. We're like, no, but that was masterful negotiation right there. So he's really good at it. And he would be like, so can I add some more tasks? Like, what if I washed the windows, or what if I washed the car? And I'm like, well, you're like, that doesn't add on top. Like you have to exchange that out. But why? Like, you want me to do things around the house. Why can't I just, because then you're going to be at 20 hours a week, and this is defeating the purpose. So you have to have the total in mind, and then you work from the total, right? Here's another option. Behavioral goals can be another option. So it can be task-oriented or behavior-oriented. So if you want your kids to work on obeying the first time, how many of you are sick of asking multiple times for your children to do something? Okay, so it could be first time obedience is the behavioral goal. Every time they first time obey, they get a check or a nick or a hash mark or a star or something, not star like star chart. That's not what I mean. There is an indicator that they accomplished that behavioral goal at that time. Here's what you need to know with this system. You have to have the worth very low if they're capable of doing this hundreds of times in a week. If you start off with 5 minutes every time they obey the first time, and they really get into this and they're like, oh gosh, I could like really bank here, they're going to be really obedient and they're going to earn a lot of screen time. So you have to keep in mind, like feasibly speaking, how many times each day is my child going to be able to accomplish this behavioral goal, and let's make the worth appropriate, right? So like 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever you think. Here's what you need to know. Another thing I train when I do my parent coaching. You need to change one thing at a time. So pick your 1 or 2 most important, pressing, set your child up for success. They can actually accomplish this goal. I mean, I'm sure, look, we have a litany of things that we want to work on, right? Like, oh man, we could do this and this and this and this. Prioritize. And when one goal has been mastered, you switch it out for something else. But we can't overwhelm them with, we're going to do 18 new things and you're going to earn time for all of it. No, we're going to have 1 or 2. Because kids have a hierarchy in their brains. I can only attend to so much at one time. So you can't ask me to do 14 things and think that I can do any of them, really. You ask me to do 1 or 2 and I'll probably get half. Okay? So they need time to process. They are not cognitive. They are not rational. They are not intellectual. We are. We have to live in their world, not the other way around. They are emotional. So a behavioral goal is going to be driven by emotions, not by cognitions. So 1 or 2, no more. It'll be overwhelming. I think that one or both or a combination or a hybrid or something altogether different will set you up so that you have a plan and you're able to go in and say, okay, so starting next Monday, starting March 1st, whenever you need, sometimes we need time to prepare and plan and get our brain wrapped around a change in our house, right? So set your start date, have the conversations with your kids, get them involved in the new ways that they earn screen time, and it becomes a gradual shift together so that everyone is on board and participating, and it's not as overwhelming as it would be otherwise. Do you need to be prepared for backlash? Yes. Do you need to be prepared for anger and crying and fits and begging and pleading and you're the worst parent ever and you've ruined my life? True story. We give a copy of my book to every client that comes to our center. The first time they bring their kid, it's like a thank you for being our client. Please read this book, and if you don't, give it to someone that needs it, right? So one of my teens, her mom never, ever, ever brings her in. She comes in by herself every single week. So as she's leaving, I said, hey, give this book to your mom, please. She didn't come in. She looks at the cover, and you can see she reads it several times and looks up at me and goes, are you trying to ruin my life? And I said, no, I'm actually not. I'm trying to save your life. And she's like, what? So trust me, this isn't going to be well received. Okay? Your kids' lives are screens if they've been given access to it to this point. Your kids will want their lives to be screens if they're not there yet, because all of their friends are on it and all of everyone they know lives on a device. So if you're not in the fight, you're going to be in the fight. But if you have a system and a plan and you've thought through this, you can succeed. So here is how you can stay in contact with me, get in touch with me, get the content that I put out, et cetera, et cetera. So I love interacting. So please email me. Like a lot of people are like, I didn't know if I should email you. Just do it. I will respond. I promise. I read every email. I love it. Brenna@thekidcounselor.com. I post content on playtherapyparenting.com, playtherapypodcast.com, and thekidcounselor.com. So there's a vast variety of blogs, videos, podcasts, all kinds of content about all kinds of things related to parenting and understanding your kids and the world in which we live. So all kinds of stuff. If you would like to listen to my podcast, Play Therapy Parenting in your podcast app is where you will find that. And I give you weekly practical parenting tips. Sometimes it's about articles, sometimes it's about experiences, sometimes it's about play therapy based parenting, but it's always good stuff. So let me make sure that I don't have anything else. I think that's all. Yes, thank you all for being here. Let me encourage you before you go. This is not easy, this is deep, it's heavy, and it can be convicting, and it can be very difficult to realize, like, gosh, I didn't know. But here's the thing, we never know what we don't know. But once we know, we are called to be good stewards of our knowledge. We're called to be good stewards of our kids. And so now that you know, with the knowledge comes responsibility. So this isn't just for your kids and your family, it's for everyone you know. When you see someone with a not a stranger necessarily, but when you see someone you care about and you love and their kid is on a screen, say something. Say, hey, I want you to listen to this. I want you to see this. I want you to read this. Because we were at an airport not too long ago, and there's mom, dad, son, daughter on the bench next to each other. And I actually took a picture of it, and I black boxed their face out so I could post it. And they sat there for hours, all of them with earphones, all of them with devices in their hands. They didn't speak to each other, look at each other, think about each other for hours. And I just thought, this is what we're doing right now. This is how we handle things. We went out to dinner not too long ago, and a mom and her teenage son, just the two of them, sat at the table next to us. They did not say a word to each other the entire dinner. She was on her phone, he was on his phone, their food came, they ate in silence, they got up and they left, and I thought, what is the point? I hope and pray to God that we care about our kids enough to connect with them. And we can't connect with our kids when they're on a device, when we're on a device, when we're all distracted, and when we're all digitally detoxing. None of us can connect the way that we should. None of us can have the relationships that we should. None of us can engage. None of us can pour into our kids. None of us can develop the way that God meant us to develop when we have screens in front of us. So can we be a people? Can we be a generation? Can we be a group of parents that say, we can't do this anymore? And that means hard lines, and it means going to school board meetings, and it means talking to principals at schools, and it means saying, I won't do it anymore. We pulled our kid out of school and we homeschool now because they refused to give us paper versions of his schoolwork. And I never ever thought we would be a homeschool family. By the way, it's the best thing we've ever done. Please homeschool your kids. But we never thought we were going to be homeschool parents. We loved his school. He was at a charter school, Christian administration. It was amazing. And then all day, every day, he's on the computer. And I just said, I need you to send paper versions. And they kept saying no. And I said, he can do math on paper. Like, I've done math on paper my whole life. What are we doing? No, we need the metrics. We need the data. We need the blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm sorry. We're done. So make hard choices. Make hard decisions. Do what you need to do on behalf of your kids. And it's not going to be easy, but nothing worth doing is ever easy. So thank you for being here. I'm so grateful.